I'm going to be straight up and real with you guys before we fully dive into this. This to me is the end result, and I mean the end result of catering. Catering the way you present the product, catering the product itself to roughly only about maybe 10% of America.
Major college football game. Last night's game, or yesterday afternoon's game, was played between Georgia and Notre Dame. This is what it sounded like as the entire stadium began to chant USA, USA, USA at the end of the national anthem. You know who didn't think it was important to share that moment with the nation? ESPN. The SEC network managed to show the moment of silence and the national anthem.
That are putting serving other people ahead of themselves. And it was a reminder that, yes, there's evil in this world, but there's also a lot of good people doing good. And I want to...
Okay, now, guys, I obviously chose to insert that little bit from Clay Travis at Outkick over this, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys right now that I do believe that he is correct. However, the thing is this right here. I'm going to be bringing a completely different perspective to this because Clay Travis is bringing this from a perspective that I've called him out before on a perspective that I don't fully, well, how do I say this right here? I think that Clay Travis saying that they all openly hate America, while it is possible that ESPN does have a lot of employees, as a matter of fact, we kind of know that ESPN has a lot of employees that hate the United States and Americans, or at least they hate a certain type of Americans. I did a take on one such individual that is out right now that, of course, is going to be available at 12 o'clock. That there, of course, being known. I'll link it in the description box for you guys anyways. And, of course, we're talking about Ryan Clark in that video. But the thing is this right here. There's another perspective that needs to be given on this that I think the ESPN is, how do I say, forgotten about. Have you guys ever heard the expression that not only did he lose himself, but he also lost his childhood self? Yeah, that right there is the direction we're going to be going at over the course of this video, so make sure you guys stick around for the full bit. So a lot of people were pointing out the fact that ESPN chose to air the national anthem, yet they chose to air it on the SEC network in the moment of silence, and they completely bypassed it the day of the Sugar Bowl. Now, like I said, this story is roughly a week old. I just now got to it, but still at the same time, I think it explains the direction that ESPN is going to be going in the future. And, of course, it's going to ultimately cause the destruction of the company, which, of course, the company is, in fact, already destroying itself. I personally believe that once they started going to more debate format, that right there is when they really and truly start to decline. That right there's another video altogether, another topic altogether. I don't want to go too much on that, but given the fact that they chose to go in this direction, and then this very, very cringy ad from Allstate.
To the Allstate Sugar Bowl. Wednesday, tragedy struck the New Orleans community. Our prayers are with the victims and their families. We also need to be stronger together by overcoming an addiction to divisiveness and negativity. Join Allstate working in local communities all across America to amplify the positive, increase trust, and accept people's imperfections and differences. Together, we win.
Yeah, I think you guys can see where the priorities are. That ad right there wouldn't be so bad if maybe they had released that ad maybe a week or two after the incident. I think we needed to talk more about the incident, especially given the fact that the guy who committed said incident was of the color that the mainstream media does not like to report on, and also of the religion that the mainstream media does not like to report on. There's also the situation in Las Vegas, too, which I did talk a little bit about in the previous video, but I did tell you guys that I would be doing a much, much more thorough breakdown of said incident on the third channel that I'm going to be creating a little bit later on this year, because that channel is going to be focusing primarily on history, incidents, crimes, even some mysteries, things that have happened in American history that the mainstream media found a way to get wrong. So don't worry, that right there is coming a little bit later on this year. Let me get back on track. But given the fact that you just had a tragedy in New Orleans, the city where the Sugar Bowl was taking place, don't you think it would be a good idea for ESPN to say, hey, look, this right here is a unifying moment. This right here is not only a unifying moment, it would also be a special moment. There's a moment of silence here. We need to honor those who lost their lives. We need to also honor first response. By the way, Tim Tebow, he came out and basically did that. I'll link in the description box. I want to stay for the most part on ESPN here. And of course, there are some people who work for ESPN that, of course, they understand the deal. But for the most part, ESPN just say, hey, look, screw this this right here. We're going to show this right on the SEC network. Now, if these people think that maybe it's an attempt at just trying to, how do I say, put this on one network versus another one, I don't understand the logic behind that, because it's a nationally televised game. Everybody in the country is watching it. So why not have that moment of unification? Why not have that on the national broadcast? Well, I think the reason why this is the case is because the people who run ESPN, and I know what you're probably thinking, ESPN is Disney owned, so therefore it's Disney making the decision here. I personally disagree. I'll give you guys my logic here in a second. I think that the heads of ESPN just really and truly are very, very much mindless, soulless drones. And mindless, soulless drones tend to be out of touch with society, tend to be out of touch with humanity. I just figure I would say that because, and you're probably thinking to yourself, Disney is obviously the exact same thing and obviously in the same direction, but here's the thing about Disney. As bad as Bob Iger is, as bad as the people have gotten over there, I don't think Disney made the decision to say we're not going to air the national anthem. I think this was a decision that was made by ESPN itself. You see, while Disney is definitely over ESPN, ESPN still has people who run the show. They still have people who run the company. They still have people who run the network the exact same way that ABC also does the exact same thing. At the end of the day, they ultimately answer to Bob Iger, but still at the same time, the company itself does have some form of autonomy. So therefore, they're the ones who chose to make the decision to not air the national anthem nationally to the country during a nationally broadcasted game. Instead, they chose to put it on the SEC network, which is just pretty bad planning on ESPN's part. I mean, trust me, they sat there for a few hours before the game and they definitely talked about this. So it was definitely something that they had planned. But once again, it just goes to show you exactly how far out of touch they are with mainstream America. It just goes to show you how it is that these people have chosen to step over dollars to make dimes by pivoting their audience, by pivoting their product and advertising their product towards a certain group of people who really aren't even that interested in sports.
Major college football game, last night's game, or yesterday afternoon's game, was played between Georgia and Notre Dame. This is what it sounded like as the entire stadium began to chant USA, USA, USA at the end of the national anthem. You know who didn't think it was important to share that moment with the nation? ESPN. The SEC network managed to show the moment of silence and the national anthem. ESPN didn't. Many of the people that work there, this is my theory, hate America. And they didn't want to show a unifying moment for America that involved chanting USA, the national anthem, the flag, or the moment of silence.
The point is this right here. The unity is just not there. Okay, we have had unity for a very long time, and ESPN obviously missed an opportunity to give us some form of unity. As a matter of fact, them putting it on the SEC network, or at least the national anthem and the moment of silence, that speaks volumes about ESPN, because they basically said that only one side of the country, those who watch college football or they watch the SEC, they're the only ones who care about America. Trust me, there are people who live in the Midwest who care about America. People who out west who care about America. People up north who love America. Not everybody votes the same way. All right, it's true. But there are a lot of people who live in said anti-American areas who are very, very pro-America, or they have anti-American politicians. This right here was just a great big giant FU to the American crowd. That right there is what it felt like to me. I was about to say misstep, but I think it was an FU to the country and to all of football fans themselves, even if it was unwittingly in the way that they actually did this. The fact of the matter is this here, the opportunity for unity, which is something that ESPN should not have missed. They obviously missed it for a reason, and you can tell that they did this methodically because they put national anthem and moment of silence on the Southeastern Conference Broadcasting Corporation, broadcasting station, which of course is an affiliate of ESPN. It's basically them saying that only one part of the country even cares about the country and everybody cares about football, when in reality, most of the fan base, most of the football watching audience does in fact care about America. It is the most patriotic of all the sports, or it was. I'd say baseball's kind of overtaken them, but then again, that's another conversation altogether. The fact of the matter is that this right here was basically a blatant FU to the audience watching from home. But let's continue. But I did say something about Clay Travis, and I did say something about the perspective that Clay Travis has. And here's the perspective. I don't know that much about Clay Travis's past. I know about his political affiliation back in 2016. Maybe this is perspective. I'm glad that he called it out for what it is. But I'm bringing a completely different perspective to this. I want you guys to kind of bear with me on this. I come from an environment where you work together regardless of what the person's race, creed, ethnicity, or whatever. I was actually learning about this even before I joined the Marines. And obviously I'm bringing the veteran perspective with me to this video here because I remember 9/11 and I remember how united this country was. I remember American flags were everywhere. I remember support the troops was all over every single car, on the back of each single vehicle. The country was actually united, and people for the most part cared about what happened to the country. We had just sustained an attack. Twin Towers had just fallen. Of course, you also had the attack on the Pentagon, which occurred at that time. Like I said, I'm not going to go into the rabbit hole or anything like that. But still, though, the point is that there was a major there was a major feeling of unity after said incident. And of course, it was also in sports. I remember the WWE running some of the most classic angles from late 2001 going into 2002. Of course, it also kind of helped save them from the failed invasion angle. I also remember baseball. American flags were all over the back of jerseys. The 2001 World Series is probably one of the craziest World Series that anybody's ever seen. And of course, also it's one of the craziest World Series that anybody ever played. I advise you guys to go look into that series. You can probably find the documentary of the series right here on YouTube. Also, to go on top of that, football, we just felt much more patriotic as a nation. And I think that somewhere right around 2004, 2005, and we could talk about the war in Iraq and all that type of stuff there because I'm obviously a veteran of that. I think what happened was our society began to start sliding into non-patriotism. And I think people started to slip back into their own little cubicles and into their own little lives. I've always felt that the Obama years were a great representation of the American people just saying, I really and truly don't care about this except myself. And of course, having an extremely stagnant economy and a guy who was running the country who did not actually love America definitely did not help the situation out. And I think what's happened is that the heads of these businesses, the heads of these companies have forgotten what it was that actually made them great. And that was an audience that for the most part was quite patriotic because the national anthem has always been a part of the sporting events in this country here. By the way, to the crowd out there who hate the national anthem, I want you guys to know something right now. Nobody orders you to stand for the anthem. Nobody does that. This is not North Korea. They ask you to stand. They ask you to honor. And of course, it's about respect. But of course, we had to go through this back in 2016 all the way up until, well, I don't really see people protesting anymore, but still, though, it feels to me like the sentiment of these people still does, in fact, exist, and it's still roaming around. And I think that that's what ESPN is doing, is they're catering to that very, very small minority, and they say, look, we're just going to blast an entire section of the country and say, look, we're just not going to air the national anthem. We don't really care anymore. I think that that is what really truly happens, that these people have become complete, total, mindless drones, mindless vessels who just don't care anymore. And it's not just Disney. It's obviously ESPN, because ESPN could have very, very easily said, hey, look, let's air this woman playing the national anthem. By the way, what really makes it worse in a lot of ways, this is what tells you these people don't have any actual values. The lady singing the national anthem is a woman of color. Isn't ESPN a company that's kind of gearing itself more towards the BET style of entertainment? Don't you think that maybe a woman of color singing the national anthem, a pretty good rendition, don't you think that that would have helped? Like I said, these people are mindless drones. They have no souls at all. These people have lost their souls. They've lost themselves. And they've also, more importantly, lost their childhood selves. The childhood self is the thing that you ultimately revert back to in life. When life gets so hectic, you lose sight of who you are, who you were. You lose sight of things. And the childhood self is normally the thing that pops back up and kind of like puts you back in your place and lets you know what is right. It's that love that you have, the natural love, the natural care that you have, that you're actually inherently given. I mean, I think that ESPN, for the most part, just lost this a long time ago. And I think the people who actually work at ESPN lost it as well. But then again, at the same time, at least ESPN doesn't have a massive sex scandal involving one of their personalities at this moment in time, which, by the way, may be an event covered later on in the future, or may be covered a little bit later on this week once we get a few more facts on that. The way I think about it is this right here. Look at what happened this past week. I'll give you guys one more example. Speaking of the All-State Sugar Bowl, speaking of that there, okay? The head coach of Notre Dame, he's a black man, Catholic, and of course he was posed a question at the end of the game after they won. And of course this little bit went viral, and of course everybody's saying such a base coach. Let me play it for you.
And James Franklin are kind of making history here. Can you kind of just put in perspective what it means to you to be, one of two black coaches in this playoffs?
Yeah, it's again, you're very grateful. It's a reminder that you are a representation for many others, and many of our players that look the same way I do. That your color shouldn't matter, right? And that the evidence of your work should. But it takes everybody.
That's how it should be. We should not be thinking about race on our sports teams. We should be working together. We should be colorblind. Mirror that to New England head coach or New England Patriots head coach who got fired yesterday, Gerard Mayo. Go back to his press conference.
You see color, because I believe if you don't see color, you can't see racism. And whatever happens, black, white, disabled person, I've always, even someone with disabilities, I always, for the most part, people are like, when they're young, they kind of make the spot hot. Younger people know what that means. But what I would say is, no, I want you to be able to go up to those people and really understand those people. So it goes back to whatever it is, black, white, yellow, it really doesn't matter, but it does matter so we can try to fix a problem that we all know we have.
Gerard Mayo is that type there, or that type of thinking is what ESPN is trying to go towards. Now, Gerard Mayo, it's possible that he said what he said there, not really thinking, not really knowing how a better way to put it. But still at the same time, given the fact that the Patriots went 4-13 and they barely beat a team that did not start any of their players, I can understand why it is that Robert Kraft fired him. By the way, that little clip is probably going to come up a little bit later on this week, probably tomorrow, because I am pretty sure that the race card is going to get played pretty heavily given the fact that Gerard Mayo was fired after his first year. So make sure you guys stick around for that, because I'm pretty sure that the race card, the race script is probably going to pick up later on this afternoon when the topic of Gerard Mayo comes up. So be ready for it. With that right there being said, guys, make sure you guys please hit the like button, subscribe, share the video, sign off in the comments, and I'll see you guys later.